When my girlfriend left me, it felt like my whole world had turned upside down. One moment, we were making plans for the future, and the next, I was sitting alone, trying to piece together where it all went wrong. I'm okay now, but back then, it was like standing in the middle of a storm with no idea how to find shelter. What about you? Have you ever experienced that kind of heartbreak? The kind that pulls the rug out from under you and leaves you questioning everything? Maybe you felt it in a relationship, or maybe it came from losing a friendship, a job, or even a dream you held close. Pause for a moment. Think about it. How did it feel? How did you handle it? Or maybe you're still carrying it with you today. When she left, I was forced to confront some tough truths, not just about us, but about myself. Why do relationships feel so complicated? Why do things that start with so much hope sometimes end in heartbreak? I've realized that relationships are like fire. They start with a spark, small and thrilling, but you've got to nurture it, feed it, and protect it. If you're not careful, it burns out, or worse, it consumes you. Can I ask you something? Have you ever been so caught up in the excitement of love that you ignored the warning signs? Maybe you brushed off the red flags, thinking things would get better. I did. But here's the thing. Love can't survive on potential alone. It needs action. It needs honesty. It needs balance. Then there's vulnerability. Now, let's be real. Vulnerability is scary. It's like standing in front of someone completely exposed, hoping they'll accept you as you are. And yet, without vulnerability, there's no true intimacy. How many times have you hesitated to open up because you were afraid of being judged or hurt? Be honest. When was the last time you held something back, not because you didn't want to share, but because you were scared of how the other person might react? It's a defense mechanism, right? But here's the paradox. The more we protect ourselves, the harder it is to truly connect. So what would it take for you to let your guard down? And when someone opens up to you, how do you make sure they feel safe? Relationships also demand compromise. And this is where things get tricky. Compromise doesn't mean giving up who you are or always meeting in the middle. It's about finding balance, understanding what truly matters to you and to your partner, and working together to honor both. But let's be real. Have you ever felt like you were giving too much in a relationship? Like you were bending over backward to make things work while the other person wasn't meeting you halfway? It's exhausting, isn't it? So here's the big question. How do you find that balance? How do you make sure both people feel valued and respected without losing themselves in the process? And let's not forget the external pressures. Life doesn't stop just because you're in a relationship. Work, family, friends, finances, health, they all add layers of stress. Have you ever felt like you were being pulled in a million different directions, with no time or energy left for your partner? Or maybe your partner was the one who seemed distracted or overwhelmed. How do you handle that? How do you keep a relationship strong when life feels like it's constantly testing you? Here's the honest truth. Relationships are hard because they require effort. They force us to look at ourselves, our flaws, our insecurities, our bad habits, and decide whether we're willing to grow. And let's be real, growth is uncomfortable. But it's also where the magic happens. Think about the lessons you've learned from past relationships. What did they teach you about yourself?
About what you want, what you need, and what you're willing to work for? At the end of the day, relationships are a mirror. They reflect back to us the good, the bad, and the things we need to work on. And yes, that's hard. But it's also what makes them so rewarding. So let me ask you this. What's one thing you're willing to work on in your current or future relationships? And what's one thing you need from your partner in return? I remember the beginning of our relationship. The late-night talks, the endless laughter, the feeling that we could conquer anything together. Have you felt that before? It's magical, isn't it? But as time went on, cracks started to show. At first, they were small. Missed calls, forgotten plans, little disagreements. But cracks, when ignored, become chasms. Here's the part no one tells you. Love doesn't just die overnight. It fades little by little. It fades when effort is replaced by complacency, when communication turns into silence, and when we becomes me and you. Have you ever felt that shift? The moment you realize the connection you once had is slipping away? I tried everything to fix it. I poured my heart into making things work. I read books on relationships, watched videos, sought advice. But here's the hard truth I had to learn. No matter how much effort you put in, a relationship won't thrive if only one person is doing the work. Have you ever been there, trying to keep something alive when the other person seemed to have already given up? It's exhausting, isn't it? Like trying to row a boat alone while the other person just sits there, watching you struggle. At some point, you have to ask yourself, is this partnership or a one-person show? Relationships should feel like two people rowing together, in sync, heading toward the same destination. Let's pause here. Think about your relationships, romantic, platonic, or otherwise. Are you both rowing together, or does it feel like you're the only one with the oars? And if you're rowing alone, how long can you keep it up before you're too tired to continue? Walking away was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. Letting go of someone you love isn't just painful, it's terrifying. You sit there, replaying the good memories, convincing yourself that maybe, just maybe, you can bring those moments back. But sometimes the person you're holding on to isn't the person they are anymore. And sometimes, the version of you who fell in love isn't the same person standing there now. Let me share an analogy that helped me understand this better. Imagine you're holding onto a rope in a game of tug-of-war. You're pulling with all your strength, desperate to keep the connection alive. But the harder you pull, the more it hurts. Your hands start to bleed, and you realize the only way to stop the pain is to let go. Letting go doesn't mean you failed. It means you've learned when to stop holding on to something that's hurting you. Have you ever had to let go of something or someone you loved deeply? How did it feel, and what did it teach you? After the breakup, I had to confront myself in a way I never had before. Who was I without her? What did I want? What did I need? It was like standing in front of a mirror and seeing all the parts of myself I'd been too afraid to face. I realized that I'd lost pieces of myself in the relationship, not because of her, but because I'd given so much of myself away without making sure I had enough left for me. Here's a question for you. When was the last time you truly checked in with yourself? Not about what others want or need from you, but about what you want and need. Relationships can't thrive unless both people come to the table whole. I learned that self-love isn't just a buzzword. It's the foundation of every healthy relationship. When you love yourself, you set boundaries, you communicate your needs, you choose partners who respect and value you. And when things don't work out, you don't crumble because you know your worth doesn't depend on someone else's love. It's funny, isn't it? We spend so much time chasing love from others, but the most important relationship we'll ever have is the one we have with ourselves. So let me ask you, how's your relationship with yourself? Are you kind to yourself? Do you forgive yourself for your mistakes? Pain isn't the enemy, it's a teacher. Heartbreak taught me how to listen, how to grow, and how to let go. It showed me that endings aren't failures, they're opportunities. Opportunities to reflect, to learn, and to prepare for something better. What about you? What lessons has pain taught you? When you're in the middle of heartbreak, it feels like it'll never end. But I promise you it does. Slowly you start to heal. You rediscover the things that make you happy. You laugh again, you dream again, and one day you'll realize that the pain you thought would break you actually made you stronger. So if you're in that place right now, if you're feeling lost, broken, or unsure of how to move forward, remember this: you are not alone. You are growing. And one day when you look back, you'll see that this heartbreak wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. Take a moment now. Think about where you are, what you've learned, and where you want to go. And as you move forward, remember, love isn't about finding someone to complete you. It's about finding someone to grow with, to laugh with, and to build with. Because at the end of the day, love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice. It's a choice to show up, to fight for what matters, and to let go when it's time. So what's your next step? What are you ready to let go of? And what are you ready to fight for? Let's raise a toast, not just to love, but to growth, to resilience, and to the incredible journey we're all on. Relationships are a journey, aren't they? They start with this incredible rush of excitement. Do you remember the beginning of a relationship that meant a lot to you? The butterflies, the late-night conversations, the feeling that you found someone who just gets you. It's intoxicating. In those early days, everything feels effortless. You laugh at the same jokes, dream about the same future, and it's like you've unlocked a secret world where only the two of you exist. But here's the thing about that honeymoon phase. It's temporary. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just reality. Real relationships aren't built on the highs. They're built on what happens when the rush fades and the real work begins. So let me ask you, what happens when the excitement fades? How do you handle it when the person you adored so effortlessly suddenly becomes someone you have to work hard to understand? This is where so many relationships hit their first real test. Because when the spark dims, what's left is, well, everything else. It's their quirks, their habits, their imperfections. Maybe they leave dishes in the sink or forget to text you back. Maybe they handle stress in a way that's completely different from how you do. And that's when you start to see them not as a perfect partner, but as a human being. And being human means being flawed.
Here's a question to think about. How do you handle those imperfections in someone else? Are you patient? Do you address them directly? Or do you sometimes let them pile up until they feel overwhelming? Because let's be honest, it's easy to let resentment creep in, isn't it? It starts small, a little frustration here, a misunderstanding there, and before you know it, you're carrying around this invisible weight. Have you ever had that happen? And if so, how did you deal with it? Did you address it head on, or did it sit there, unspoken, until it became too big to ignore? One of the hardest parts of relationships is realizing that love alone isn't enough. Love is foundational, yes, but it's not a magic fix. Think about it. How many relationships have you seen fall apart? Not because there wasn't love, but because there wasn't communication, respect, or shared effort. Love can get you through a lot, but it can't carry the whole weight of a relationship on its own. So here's a thought. What else besides love do you think is absolutely essential in a relationship? Trust, patience, a sense of humor, all of the above? And then there's the issue of timing. Oh, timing. Have you ever met someone who felt perfect for you, but the timing was just wrong? Maybe you were in different places in your lives. Maybe one of you was ready to commit while the other was still figuring things out. Timing can be a cruel thing, can it? It's like two puzzle pieces that almost fit, but don't quite click into place. So, how do you navigate that? Do you wait and hope the timing will align someday? Or do you accept that sometimes love isn't enough to overcome the circumstances? Let's not forget the influence of our past experiences. Every one of us carries the weight of our history into relationships. Maybe it's the way we were raised, the relationships we've witnessed, or the heartbreaks we've endured. How much of your past do you think influences the way you approach relationships now? Have you ever found yourself reacting to a situation not because of what's happening in the moment, but because of something that happened years ago? Sometimes we don't even realize the walls we've built. We think we're protecting ourselves, but in reality, those walls might be keeping the right people out. And that's a scary thought, isn't it? So let me ask you, how do you balance protecting your heart with staying open to love? How do you allow yourself to be vulnerable without feeling like you're risking too much? Now let's talk about effort. Relationships demand it. There's no way around that. But effort isn't just about the big gestures like buying flowers or planning date nights. It's about the little everyday moments, checking in, asking how their day was, remembering their favorite coffee order. Have you ever been in a relationship where you felt like the effort wasn't mutual? Like you were the one doing all the work while the other person just coasted along? How did that make you feel? And more importantly, how did you handle it? Effort is a two-way street, but here's a hard truth. Sometimes even when both people are trying their best, it still doesn't work out. And that's heartbreaking, isn't it? To give so much of yourself to something, only to watch it slip through your fingers. But here's another perspective. What if those relationships that didn't work out were meant to teach you something? What if they were preparing you for something or someone better? And that brings us to perhaps the hardest part of relationships, letting go. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved? It feels impossible, doesn't it? Like tearing a piece of yourself away. But sometimes, letting go is the most loving thing you can do, for them and for yourself. It's not about giving up. It's about recognizing when something isn't serving you anymore. So, if you've ever let someone go, how did you find the strength to do it? And what did you learn from the experience? Here's the thing. Relationships will challenge you in ways you never expected. They'll make you question yourself, push you to grow, and sometimes break your heart. But they'll also bring you joy, connection, and the kind of love that makes it all worth it. So let me leave you with this. What are you willing to do for the relationships that matter to you? And what do you hope to receive in return? Because at the end of the day, relationships aren't just about finding the right person. They're about becoming the right person for yourself and for someone else.